Do not be afraid. Y'all, this issue of fear, it is important. And it was so critical that in the scriptures, some rendition of this command is given over 300 times. It is said in different ways, different variations, but it's basically the same thing. Fear not. Do not be afraid. Be fearless. Fear ye not. Over and over and over again in different ways. God wants to say to us the exact same thing. In fact, it is so critical and so important to him that he gets to the New Testament and Paul writes a letter to a young man named Timothy, and he says, Tim, this is what you need to know, that he has not given us a spirit of fear. He says, of all the important things, Timothy, that you need to know in your life and in this ministry that God is sending you through, too, as you go through things in this journey of life that you will inevitably go through, he says, would you remember that what our God does not give, and by the way, our God is in the gift-giving business, but one thing that he will never wrap up and tie a bow on to give to you is fear. He just doesn't do fear. That's just not the way he rolls. He gives power and love and a sound mind.
Fear has become normative in your life. How are we released from that? The Bible talks about so much about fear. So many times the word is used in the Bible, sometimes in a negative sense, other times it's in a positive sense when it tells us to fear the Lord. It's used in a positive sense in terms about our reverence for God, but it's regularly used in a negative sense that is being terrorized by that which is perceived to bring us harm. Of all the passages we could go to, and there are legion, I want to take you to one of my favorites. It's a story found in Matthew, Mark, and John. But I'm going to look at Matthew's version because Matthew tells us something the other two do not about Peter's involvement in this situation. So I want to give you some principles right now to deal with fear. Verse 22 says of Matthew 14, immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side while he sent the crowds away. After he had sent the crowds away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray, and when it was evening, he was there alone. But the boat was already a long distance from land, battered by the waves, for the winds were contrary. If you are in the will of God, Jesus has me here. If you are in the will of God, Jesus has me here. You see, verse 22 says that immediately he made his disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side. It was while they were doing what Jesus told them to do that they ran into a fearful situation. We're not talking about people who say, I don't care about Jesus, I don't care about God, I don't care about God's will, I'm going to do my own thing. These disciples at this time were in the perfect will of God and also in a perfect storm. In other words, obeying God can sometimes lead to rough sailing. So these disciples were in the perfect will of God, yet they are struggling with a bad situation that is going to make them very, very much afraid. Verse 25. And in the fourth watch of the night, he came to them, walking on the sea. Jesus knew where they were. He's praying for them. Now, he's walking on the water. But wait a minute, maybe I missed something. Wasn't the water the problem? Wasn't the water what all this issue was about? The winds and the waves beating the ship down? Watch this now. Jesus came to them walking on their problem. Jesus allows fearful situations in our lives so that he can come to us in a way he has never come to us before. Look at the next verse. It says, and when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified. And they said, it is a ghost. And they cried out in fear. You see, the problem is, they didn't recognize him because they weren't looking for him. They were just trying to get out of this mess. And now my man Peter stands up. I love me some Pete. Peter said to him, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. Oh, that's rich. And that's Pete. He didn't want to be satisfied to stay in the boat. He didn't want to be satisfied just to be delivered from the storm. He said, before you fix this problem, let me join you and walk on it. Before you ever fix it, I want to see what it feels like to be on top of a situation. See, most of us are praying one prayer: get me out of it, because I'm scared. What Peter says is, before you get me out of it, his prayer wasn't get me out of it, show me what it feels like to walk on it. Show me what it feels like to stand on top of the problem, to stand on top of the fear, to stand on top of the confusion, to stand on top of the terror and walk on it. Bid me come. Now you got to bid me come, because if you don't say nothing, I ain't going. So bid me come. Jesus says to him, okay, Peter, come. Verse 29, come on. Peter got out of the boat, walked on the water, and came to Jesus. That had to be an experience of a lifetime. Peter got to join Jesus on top of the problem. And guess where Jesus wants you to join him? On top of it. But, somebody say but, seeing the wind. But wait a minute now. This is the same wind he was looking at before he got out the boat. Wind ain't changed. Nothing has changed yet. But seeing the wind, he became, here we go, frightened. He's scared. And beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. Jesus, save me. And immediately Jesus reached down. Now look at what Jesus said. Jesus reached down and said, you of little faith, why did you doubt? There's a whole lot of lesson there. Number one, he didn't say ye of no faith. He said ye of little faith. Because he had enough faith to leave the boat. See, the other disciples had no faith because they ain't go nowhere. See, faith involves movement. You can tell me all day long, I want to get out of debt. If you don't start honoring God, then that's talk, that's not faith. Faith demands movement. He had little faith because it lifted up his foot and it carried him out of the boat. But the reason why it was little is because he used it to get started, but he didn't use it to keep going. Little faith is where you get started because you trust him, but then you allow circumstances to cause you to stop trusting him. And the reason we know you stop trusting him is you stop walking. You stop walking. You stop moving because you don't see any way you're going to get out of this. You just see this thing is so scary that if I keep going, I'm going to drown. Not believing that Jesus is the author and finisher of our faith. He not only wants you to get started, he wants you to complete the task. He wants you to finish.
The situation is not the problem in the boat, because the boat is designed to float as long as the situation on the outside doesn't get on the inside. Boats only sink when the situation on the outside has gotten on the inside. Do you understand what I'm saying? You can walk through Hell's Kitchen, it doesn't even bother you at all. But the moment it starts to get in you, you are only drowning because the life around you has now gotten in you. It's in your conversation, it's in your speech, it's in your thought life, it's in your attitude. And that's the first sign of going down. When you allow the things outside to get on the inside, you begin to go down. People who ride on top of the storms do it because they can float through it without allowing it to get in them. Oh, you don't hear what I'm saying. You don't hear what I'm saying to you. You can go through, I don't care if it's a recession, I don't care if it's a depression. There are people who became millionaires in the middle of a depression because they didn't allow the news on the outside to affect their thought life on the inside. When the things on the outside get down inside of you, you begin to go down. How do I keep it out? I'm glad you asked. They pitch the ship within and without, tarring it within and without. In every crack, in every open place, they pitch it to the intent that they know that the waters are going to come, and they want to build up a defense against the things on the outside getting on the inside. You don't want to associate, become tied up with, become intricately involved with people who penetrate your pitch. Negative, doubtful, fearful, bad news boys who keep coming in your life. Child, you better watch out. If I was you, I wouldn't do that. You ought to be scared. You got to use common sense. All of those people begin to leave holes in your faith. Watch what I'm telling you. When they leave you, I don't care how much faith you got, when they leave you, you say, well, I don't know. I don't know. You want to be with people that build you up and strengthen you and fortify you and encourage you so you can go through it without it going through you.